Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Ridge Community Church podcast. My name is John. I'm one of the pastors at the Ridge, and our vision is to bring the hope of Jesus into every home. So we want to bring you something hopeful and helpful for your everyday life, whether you've been following Jesus for a while or you're still trying to figure out exactly what you do believe about God. Now, you'll find on this podcast things that'll help with conversations about marriage and parenting and mental health and work, practical things to help you in your faith journey, and a lot more. So whether you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app or you're watching on YouTube, be sure to follow and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the hopeful and helpful conversations. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to this episode of the Ridge Podcast. I'm excited to share with all of you a conversation that I got to have with Isa, who's a licensed professional counselor in training and did a lot of work for us in developing a resource for our recent At the Movies movie, Inside Out 2, where we discussed a lot of things related to mental health, identity, and emotions. And particularly, she helped develop a resource that's designed to help parents have conversations with their kids about those three topics. And so we dove into and just a little bit of a deeper dive in a conversation about that conversation guide, about mental health conversations with your kids, talking about emotions, identity, all of those things. And so I hope that you get a lot out of this conversation. I'd encourage you to head over to the description of this video, click on that resource guide, read through it. It's a really helpful tool to really have discussions with your kids, whether they're elementary, teenagers. It's got different conversation guides for each of those things. I think really anybody can gain some helpful information from this conversation. So I hope that you enjoy my conversation with Isa. Hi, Isa. Thanks for coming on the Ridge Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
How are you doing today?
It's been good. I was outside earlier mowing the lawn, so it's
nice. Gotta love the Wisconsin summers. It's like all the hopes of the winter is like stuffed into like 3 months.
Yeah. Get everything in the 3 months and then back to hibernation. So
exactly. Yeah. Okay, I'm super curious. So we're in the middle of our At the Movie series. We had our first animated movie, Inside Out 2. As a healthcare professional or what's the right, like, professional counselor, like what's the phrasing? Professional
counselor, IT and training till I get my several thousand hours. So yeah.
Right. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So, as somebody who works with, just with people's mental health and helping with counseling and, how, like, when Inside Out first comes out, I'm sure that was, I remember watching it and being like, I imagine this is like a super helpful tool to explain to kids and maybe even adults, how to like process and maybe understand some of their emotions. Obviously Inside Out 2 comes out and there's it kind of builds upon that, but adds some new emotions. Just started there. Like, how, in your field, do you talk about Inside Out with like parents or kids? And have you ever used that before in that counseling setting?
Absolutely. In fact, my supervisor has like a whole Inside Out curriculum that you can use in like watch clips in sessions or just use without it. I've definitely used Inside Out in many sessions. I think it's basically applicable to all ages. It's just depending on, the teens and adults might be more hesitant to use the Inside Out, but it depends on the kid and the person. So it's definitely a helpful tool.
Yeah. You mentioned the difference between ages. Why do you think it's important to maybe change how you approach the conversation about mental health or emotions, identity, all this kind of stuff that's wrapped into one, when you go about doing that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you see with kids as they grow up, they're very different in different stages. I think how I approach it as like a counselor versus like how parents approach it, it just kind of depends on the kid. And, even sibling to sibling, it's going to be completely different, even if they're at like the same age or stage or when they were. It just depends on the kid and their intellectual level. And then there's also natural development of the brain that impacts that as well. So
yeah. Yeah, and maybe I can take a step back here. So obviously, like I said, we're at the movie series. We just watched Inside Out 2. And you helped put together a conversation guide to really help guide parents through some conversations with a wide variety of ages. I mean, there was like before elementary school all the way up to your teen years in high school, and I imagine that being able to cover all those different ages with on this topic is quite a challenge. How'd you go about creating that?
Yeah, I would say I went to some of the resources I had at New Life. Definitely have like a lot of things at the ready that people who I work on the like neurodivergent and the pediatric team. So there's definitely a lot of materials like already available within our office. And then I also just, did some extra research and found some scholarly articles to see what all supported that. And I don't know. For me, it was fun. So I got to dive in and use Inside Out, which is definitely like one of my top favorite movies, and make discussion guides. So, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're a parent right now and you're listening to this, I cannot encourage you enough. We'll have the resources linked in our description. But check out that resource. I mean, even if you don't have kids, I mean, I think as I was reading through that, I think some of those things were just great reflection questions for yourself. Like if you are trying to process through like how like your own emotions, your own identity, how to wrestle through those things. But then obviously this is really a guide to how do you start broaching the conversation with your kids. And I don't think it's something that's necessarily reserved for if your kid is struggling, right? You can have these conversations preemptively too, right?
Yeah. And honestly, I think that that's like going to be the most helpful in the long run. Like if you're having those conversations up front and you're getting into the emotions on a regular basis, having that foundation is going to help in the future when they're struggling more, and asking all those questions, especially in those teen years where you're supposed to ask all these questions. But I think culturally it's just become very heavy and complicated, and kids are growing up so fast. So it's helpful to have that foundation that they can fall back on their parents or guardians when they need to.
Yeah. And what a cool way to, I think, set the stage for you being a safe person to talk to about those things, right? Because if you've already set an example that, oh, this is something that we do talk about in our household, and we we're able to have those conversations, you're right. Then in crisis mode, it's just a normal conversation that you have to process through those things, rather than, I think that there's certain ages where you stop asking those questions of your parents and you start asking other places.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Sure.
Maybe we could start with just like the beginning foundation. If a parent wants to start broaching these conversations with their kid, they want to start talking to them about, hey, how are you feeling? How do you process these things? How do you start the conversation in a way that maybe helps them open up?
I'm going to break it down kind of by ages a little bit. I'd
Perfect.
say, like elementary-ish and younger. I think I would just start by kind of checking in with feelings. With my kids, we try to do like every night, we check in on feelings. We're not batting 1,000 on that, but we try to check in when we think about it and just like see how they're feeling. And we use the inside out symbols if I'm wearing my shirt, or if I'm wearing my non-inside out shirt, then I'll just go through some of the like basic core 5 emotions and kind of see how they're feeling for that day. And then we also model it as well. Like our youngest does not say how he's feeling because he's 2, but like my husband and I will both will say our emotions.
Yeah.
And like just kind of set that stage that it's okay. Like we don't say we're happy every night because that's not true. Or sometimes we're happy and sad. So I think just modeling that open space to talk about those feelings. And then we'll sometimes like try to talk about like what happened during the day that like led to those feelings for all of us. And I think that helps with that foundation as well. If you're coming in it from the older kids, it's definitely definitely a harder task with those teens and preteens even, where they're getting to be too cool to talk to their parents, which is totally normal. But I was just listening to John Townsend's book on boundaries with teens, and he was talking about like just setting that time. And if you're feeling disconnected from your kid, he was like, just force them to go on a walk with you, or like whatever it is, force them to go on a drive with you, and leave their phones, leave your phone too, and just, yeah, eventually they're just going to talk because there's nothing else to do, and they'll tell you about their life. And I think we just need to give, especially teens, just give them the space to do that rather than like forcing them. I think it will just come with time, and they'll start opening up a little bit, as much as teens do, depending on your teenager. So,
yeah. And it sounds like, especially if these are conversations that you plan on having like regularly, having a rhythm to them sounds like it'd be really helpful, to where there's almost a, it's not like a, we need to talk. Let's sit down at the table and have this like, not like a forced heart to heart where you were addressing something and they're like kind of caught off guard. But if they know and they can anticipate that conversation is just going to be a part of their regular rhythm, I imagine that's really helpful.
Yeah, I think it's best to have just something built into the routine. And ideally, eventually, like they'll become more and more comfortable. Like they'll just bring it up at dinner or whatever. But for us, we do it at bedtime. And like, I think that's just, yeah, our kids are very routine, especially at the little ages. And just building it in the routine makes it that they know it's there. It's a fallback. If you did have a terrible day, you can be like, oh yeah, this was bad or scary or whatever. We're in a very scary phase in my household. Everything's scary.
If this is something, because I imagine there's probably like a spectrum, right? And probably even in kids that you counsel where, some maybe are more naturally in touch with how they're feeling, or can regularly identify the emotions that they're feeling, versus some that may just struggle to say, I'm not exactly sure how I'm feeling, but I know I don't feel good. Maybe that's what they know.
Yeah.
Is there any tools that you can use or help them to maybe more readily identify what emotions they're feeling?
Honestly, for kids who are struggling with just like the general basic labeling of emotions at any age, I typically go with the Inside Out characters, like just those basic 8, 7, 8. I don't know. I'm wearing the shirt. I know you can't see it, but I was using it to cheat and count how many there were. But just using that to start with, or if they're too cool for Inside Out, like I just have some other visual where it's like kind of listed out. There's also like, if you Google feelings wheels, there's a lot of good charts online too of like, just it breaks it down into those core like 5, and then it branches off to some other emotions. But just getting them to label in the moment that feeling or emotion, versus saying like, I feel good, I feel bad, but digging in a little past that will help them start to like associate what feeling goes with that good or bad. Obviously, like if your child is on the autistic spectrum, they might not be able to identify as well, or there's other mental health issues that might impact that as well. But for the typical kiddo, like that's going to help if they just start at the beginning and then work their way up and learn more vocab for their feelings.
And why is that an important thing? Why is it important for to start developing the ability to recognize your own emotions?
Yeah, I think recognizing your emotions is just essential for life. I think that it will help our kids as they grow up and then become adults. Like, I think we all need to be in touch with our emotions, because if we don't understand them or have, not a hold, but like some say into what happens, kind of like the end of Inside Out 2, where she started calling joy forward. And like having that input, then they really will just like take charge, and we will be very unpredictable adults, and it will probably be a very unstable life that we lead. And I think, I don't know, I don't have like specific biblical references, but I think that that's how God designed us to be. And he gave us these feelings. And like when Jesus was here, he expressed many of those feelings, and flip tables, which is one of my favorite references for kids who try not to be angry. I was like, You know what? It's okay to be angry. It's just like how we respond.
Yeah.
So I think that like God's blessed us with that same trait that he has. And I think it's just us understanding them so we can better input them in the world and positively affect others.
Yeah. You know, one of the emotions that was new in Inside Out 2 was anxiety. And I was super interested that was something that was like kind of really closely associated with like the onset of, you know, high school or puberty. And it made me curious, like, is anxiety something, I know it's very stereotypically associated with becoming a teenager in that kind of realm of things. But do you see anxiety cropping up in kids that are younger than that?
It's funny you mentioned that because that's definitely like, yeah, something I've thought about too, because I think it's an awesome part of the movie, and anxiety is by far my favorite character. As far as like the brain side, I don't study the brain, at least not yet. So I don't know if like anxiety crops up before then, which I would guess it does, at least for some. But as far as like the increase in anxiety and like that flood of emotions, that's definitely very associated with puberty and those changes in the brain that are happening like 12 to 15 years old. Where I think, yeah, Inside Out did it perfectly, where all of a sudden she woke up the next morning and they barely touched the controls, and then she was like yelling at her mom. I don't know if that part was in the service or not, but I have it all memorized anyways. But like you just, you know, all of a sudden sad becomes this huge overflow of sadness, and anger is like slamming the door, and like it's almost like, you know, they're 2 years old again. From the parents' eyes, not from the teens' eyes. but those big emotions that like all of a sudden they don't know how to handle them anymore again. I think that that's very typical around that time, and like right in the midst of that transition where they're kind of getting this responsibility and these expectations put on them to be like adults, but they're also kids, and they want to be kids, but they want to be adults. And the world kind of puts them in the middle too. Like we don't know where they belong either. The end of the day, so just a emotional time.
Yeah. How helpful is it? I imagine there's an element too of like even talking through with Inside Out of being like, hey, this is normal, everyone has these things, everyone has these emotions. Adult have say that 10 times fast. Adults have these emotions as well, right? I think that was one of my favorite parts of Inside Out. One is when you first get a seat inside the minds of the mom and the dad, and you realize that it's not just a kid that deals with these emotions, it's everybody, but they have maybe learned how to handle them in a more appropriate way. Is that a part of just assuring your kid, is just letting them know that this is a normal part of growing up and getting older, and that they're not alone in those feelings?
Yes. I think, I can't remember the exact quote, but there was a quote from probably Boundaries. It's a go-to for sure. But it talked about the statistics of, like, yes, it's something that adults go through. And when we're talking to our teens, it's important to relate to that emotion and tell them that like we're seeing and understanding them, but like kind of towing the line that we're not just making it about us and talking about how we experienced it when we were teens. Because I know, like for myself too, even with my kids, I'm like, yeah, I used to be a kid too. And then I like tell them the story, and they're like, you're old and I don't care. Even if it was the most applicable thing, they don't care. It's already long gone. That was in the 1900s. So, you know, that was a million years ago.
So far back.
Yeah. It was a different century, for crying out loud. So I think that like we need to get in touch with that emotion and remember what it was like to be a teenager, because I think we can all agree that it was just a horrible emotional time. And then get in touch with that emotion so that we can accept and understand them and just give them the space to talk. And when they say something sucks, don't say, yeah, but XYZ. Just say, yeah, that sucks. Like it totally does. Because I think that that's what teens need the most of, and they get the least of. So,
is there anything helpful to creating that space? Like you mentioned, I know that you mentioned earlier the walks and things like that, but I imagine there's a temptation to try to immediately fix You know, and I think that's even part of the conversation guide is it was less about providing answers for your teens and more about asking questions that help them have like discover really how to process through those things.
Yeah, I think it's so hard to put into practice. It's like a simple idea, but it's so hard to put it in actual practice as a parent. But I think it's really just comes down to giving your kid the space to talk, or your teen, and then trying to just listen until they tell you the whole thing. Do our best not to have like a big reaction. Obviously, we're not going to be 100% at that, especially when we're hearing, something hard that they're going through or something dangerous that they did or reckless. It's hard not to react in the moment to that. And I think that that's acceptable. And we should explain to our kids what's happening as well and after the fact for that. But I think just giving them the space to talk about it and not judging them or commenting, and just honestly, like, especially for teens, I feel like parents like just don't give much advice. Like they're not going to listen by and large. And I think we just need to let them talk, and they're going to listen to their friends and other like adult mentors in their lives. Like I know, like I think about the Ridge students, like those are the people they're going to listen to, those other adult mentors and like powerful influences in their lives at this time. So we just need to be setting that foundation that they can come back to us. But at the end of the day, like we just need to be there to listen. And I think that will create the like positive foundation for them to come back on. And we have to, trust them more and more as they grow older, that they're going to be more independent and that we can trust them.
One of the things that gets brought up in the movie and in your guide is this idea of like grounding techniques. And I'll have a follow-up question in a second, but maybe could you just explain like, what is a grounding technique?
Yeah. So grounding is, I don't know. I think the root of it comes from like the literal ground and just like being in touch with where you are and what you're doing. Like I think in the movie, Riley like touches the bench or something like that. And she's just like coming back to reality instead of like completely in her mind and in her ruminating thoughts. It's just coming back and finding the present moment and focusing on her breathing. She did in the movie, I know, and just where you're at. Because when anxiety takes over, like Inside's Out, beautiful portrayal of that. I think, you can't see that. Your brain's just like going a mile a minute and you can't focus on anything other than the worst possible scenario and how you've ruined everything in your life. We have to do something to come back. In the movie, Riley did that awesomely. And I think that there are there are at least many ways that people can do grounding in their life or teach their kids grounding techniques as well, to just help them regain control or practice to regain control so that they can eventually take hold of that anxiety.
Yeah. How do you help your kid start to use and incorporate those grounding techniques? And maybe if you have a few off the top of your head, maybe you could share a couple.
All right. I'm about to be a huge hypocrite. Are you ready? Okay.
Yes.
So I think the best way to start is with breathing exercises. But that being said, I hate breathing exercises personally, like for myself. So I feel so terrible when I'm teaching people. I always give them other options as well. But like the easiest one is truly breathing. There's different things, like there's figure 8 breathing or like 5-finger breathing where you go up and then down and then like have the kid breathe with you, which can be a great way to start out for the younger kids especially. I mean, breathing is great for all ages and stages. But that just kind of helps slow that internal heart rate so that you can like start to calm your entire body, starts to calm your mind, and eventually you just come back to reality. And I say reality. I know that people are in reality even in their anxiety, but that's how it works in my mind. Yeah. You're just coming back. You're coming back to us.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And then there's like some imagery that would be probably a little older. I think Yeah, I think teens and adults probably like it the best, but depending on your kid, they might like it at any age. But there's like a 5 4 3 2 1. I'll send you a link that you can put out there if you'd like.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's basically just engaging the five senses. It's like five, look at five things around you, and you call out five things in the room, and then you go through sight, hearing, touching, listening, all that good stuff, taste. And then that just kind of is engaging kind of like both sides of the brain. We get that emotional and we get that rational side working together. And that helps because when we're having like an anxiety attack or panic attack, the emotional side of things is just, it's taken over. It's completely in control. There's no reasoning in that moment. So if you ever see someone like in an anxiety attack, you can't be like, just that's unrealistic. Stop worrying. Like that's not going to work in that moment. Kind of like when you
it rarely works anyway, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's kind of like when you break up like a fist fight at like the school.
Yeah.
You can't be like that was not the way to solve your problem. Like you just have to separate the kids, let them calm down. Yeah. Same thing with anxiety. Like you just have to wait before you get the rational side in there. But the more we can train our kids, train ourselves to get them working together and using those grounding tools, then our brains can kind of settle down so that we can see both sides of the equation.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? Where it's like the anxiety. I love how it describes it's the fear of the things that you can't see. You know, it's the fear of the things you can't see. It's really, even though they're very real things that you might be afraid of, all the scenarios you're playing out are in your head. And so how do you get out of your head and just be where you are and be present? And yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense to like kind of recenter and remove yourself from the just kind of present in the ruminating thoughts.
Yes, yeah. And I know I've heard people like argue that like I'm just thinking of through all of the like horrible situations so that I can be prepared, which to a degree is what anxiety's for, as she self-disclosed. But at the same time, if we're doing that for every little thing and we're going above and beyond like anything that might probably actually happen, our brains can't tell the difference between like what if scenarios and like what's actually happening. So like our amygdala is like overworking and it thinks we're in danger already. Like, so we're going through all that work. Our heart rates are going high, like all that work when we're not actually in danger. So yeah, being able to bring our bodies down and our minds to a calmer state definitely makes a difference in the long run.
So would you recommend for a parent trying to teach their kid some of these techniques? Is it like, hey, let's practice and do this together right now in moments where we're not experiencing that and then do them? Or is it like having a helpful phrase that said, okay, now it's time to practice that when you notice them experiencing it? What are helpful ways for where it like kind of moves just from, hey, breathing to actually like in the moment they're able to start incorporating it?
Yeah, I would say I always recommend doing it when you're calm and you're not escalated. If you can build it into your routine, like every morning, every night, I don't know, maybe with a certain meal, you guys do it together. And it just becomes part of that routine because that repetition is going to help you remember how to use it so that when you're actually in a crisis or you're super escalated because of something, like you'll be able to pull it out and use it during that time. But until we have that repetition, that routine, like you're not going to be able to pull it out in the like height of your crises. At least most people want people to. So I think practicing it, just building it into the routine, building it into daily, weekly, something where you're practicing it. And you could practice different like grounding techniques or mindfulness activities and just start to get used to it so that it feels less weird. Because I think it is kind of awkward to get used to, especially for those teens that, you know, new things are just scary in general, especially if your parents telling you to do them. So I think just getting used to it. And I think for teens too, like it's something where you could tell them that why you're doing it and explain it to them and then give them the paper or whatever the app where it tells you what to do and let them do it on their own because, yeah, they're private beings.
Well, I think there's something cool to the idea of, allowing of practicing something in those moments and creating it be a part of a natural rhythm to, I think about athletes, and it's like, I'm a huge baseball fan. It's like, you don't practice your first ever swing when you're in the batter's box trying to win, right? It's thousands and thousands of swings in moments you don't need to swing. Right. And, yeah, I imagine having it under the description of, hey, you have times where you feel bad, right? This can help you feel less bad. Is a very simple, yet I guess I don't really know how effective that would be, but
it depends on the kid and the age too, for sure. But yeah, I mean, if it helps, it helps, and they can pull it out and use it when they want to.
Yeah. There's got to be a piece of it that's like knowing your kid and knowing what works for them, right?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely depends on the kid.
Cool. Well, hey, as we kind of wrap up our conversation and we're thinking about, hey, how to utilize this conversation guide, how do you help your kids with recognizing their emotions, their mental health? The one element that we haven't super touched on is how each of these pieces kind of feed their identity. I feel like identity can kind of be a very wispy, cloudy concept. It's for anybody, but especially for kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Inside Out actually does a really good job of like, hey, what do you believe about yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to I guess, help your kids develop an identity that's like true versus an identity that's like based upon a lot of these lies that they're probably telling about themselves?
Oh, that's a tricky one.
Save the biggest for last, right?
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. I think, I agree that Inside Out did a great job kind of showing like how Riley started out with like, I'm a good person. And like, that's kind of what it was at the core. And that was like very, like elementary age beliefs. And like, that's what's gone into it. Like, it's good stuff. And she's grew up in a home where like that was what was being reiterated to her. And that's awesome. And I think that honestly, like, I think in the movie, like she had that good foundation, that she was like a kind person. She was helpful. And although she kind of ignored all the bad about her at the beginning, at the end, like she had that foundation where she could eventually see that like, yeah, she's a good person, but she's also has the capacity to be a bad friend. She has the capacity to do this and this, and like all of these different emotions feed into it. And yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's really about the foundation we're setting. And like, I don't think, like, obviously if we can start the second they're born, that's ideal. Sure. But at any age, like we can start building that foundation and we can start firming it up. Like, I don't care if your kid's 18 years old or whatever, like you can start showing them and telling them. I mean, especially at like those teen years, you can tell them like, hey, like this is how I did in the past. This is how we're going to do it now. And just kind of building up that foundation for them. And I think, I don't know, like I just think that kids and teens today just need to hear that like they're loved the way they are. And I feel like, I don't know, society and culturally, like we've lost touch of like that true unconditional love that I think that like us as Christians know from like that God love, and that just like unconditional, unwavering love. And I think that that's where there's just so many issues with like identity and who I am. And it's just like, God loves you the way you are. And so I'm going to do my best to love you just as you are, just the way you came out, and just as you grow and you have a million pieces to your personality, but like, yeah, you're just loved as you are. And I think that, I don't know, I just think that that's what so many teens and kids want and need to hear. And not all of them are getting that. And I think that, yeah, that's probably the key.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on this, and this is the side of the movie where it even falls short, right? Where why would it have this piece as a movie produced by Hollywood, right? It's not gonna be like, hey, your identity is rooted in what God says about you. Cool. Yeah, it would be cool, maybe someday. But I think that is so key, right? Is that, and adults, and every adult I know has struggled with this to one degree or another, of like, how do you truly believe what God says about you and that your value rests in Him? And I think that the more we can help kids and teenagers recognize that their value isn't based on the things that we feel like it might be. Like, their identity is not based on what their friends say about them. At the end of the day, it's not even really about the things that we say about ourselves or our parents say about us. It's what God says about us. And the more I think we can point to that, the more we won't fall into the trap of, because every person that's a person is flawed. And so you're going to let down your kids. Their mentors are going to let them down at some point in some capacity. Their friends are going to let them down. But God won't. And so, as challenging as it might be, recentering on that, I think really does set a foundation. And you know where your kids are at and where they're at in their own faith story too. And so there's an element of that too. But I think that's the cool thing that those who follow Jesus get the chance to point back to, is your identity is one who is loved and a child of God, which I think is really beautiful. Well, that was my conversation with Isa, and I hope that you got a lot of that conversation. If you're a parent, if you're a mentor for kids and teenagers, and I really do think that ending piece where we talked about the value, our identity really does come from God and what God says about us, what He proved about us when He was willing to sacrifice His life for us. And I want to encourage you, go to our description, get the resource guide, start having regular rhythm conversations with your kids and teenagers about their identity, about their mental health, about their emotions in a way that sets them up for future success going forward in their life.